Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. We'll be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these EdTech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode.
Welcome back, everyone, for another bonus live episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast here at the eduWeb Summit in Orlando. We are beginning stages of day 2 of the summit here. Have Audrey from Ologie. We'll start as we always do. If you want to just briefly introduce yourself and your background, then we'll get into what brings you to the event and some other stuff that you are kind of speaking on and other stuff like that.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here. Like you said, I am Audrey Ward. I work at Ologie, a branding and marketing agency based in Ohio. We specialize in higher ed, so very much in our element here. For me personally, I am on the digital team at Ologie, so leading those media campaigns, working on web builds and things like that. But I also started on the branding side of the house, which is kind of what we're known for, I think, for the most part. So I'm a writer, if I haven't mentioned that yet. So really a lot of experience with building these stories about the brands and finding differentiators and things like that. My even further background is that I started in creative writing. I was writing fiction and novels and things like that. So I really brought that to Ologie in a way to kind of dig into these institutions and find, again, those differentiators, the stories there that maybe aren't getting out. What we hear a lot is that, we're not standing out and we don't really know, how to get away from our competitors and our peers and things like that. So I think that creative writing background really helps me find those stories and tell them in new ways. And now that's over on the digital team with our growing media offer and web builds and things like that. So it's really nice to have the skill set that scales across the company. And it's just a lot of fun too.
Yeah. And I know of Ologie, like I've known some people that have ended up working there and just like kind of following on social media and everything. So great to have I don't think I've actually had anybody on the podcast that's from Ologie. So you're kind of repping the team there. But I feel like I have to ask, though, you've alluded to writing, creative writing, like, can people find it anywhere? What was it about? I guess just this little glimpse, little teaser.
Yeah, well, not technically. I don't think you might find it lurking on Amazon because I wrote 2 self-published young adult dystopian novels. That's like what I was like a Hunger Games girl, all that stuff. That is what I grew up loving. And so I wrote it and I did self-publish it. And honestly, I did sell a handful of copies. I ended up taking them down. This is also like 10 years ago. But they might still be out there if you Google Audrey Taylor Ward. But now, yeah, I think writers kind of always have stuff churning in our heads. I have a couple little like plot bunnies, as we call them in the industry. Some Google documents started and books and things like that. But nothing out there.
Yeah.
Yet. Ologie keeps me pretty busy.
Right. Yeah. It'll be there. You go back to that, that life or whatever. But
exactly.
I mean, I think it is that idea, though, of like, the sort of creative muscle or sort of that outlet or whatever, like maybe, like in certain points in your life, you maybe have or will kind of like channel that energy out there. But at least it's sort of like in the very much of the sense of the muscle, I guess, that like, you've really it sounds like kind of kept yourself sort of like, pretty loose in the sense of, just always kind of looking at things with that lens, being able to kind of like express that, the different contexts and audiences and stuff. So, appreciate you sharing a little bit, about your role and about Ologie. But what brings you to the summit this year? I know you have a session, for us in time and space, takes place later today. But you just want to talk about, kind of that session and just sort of like what you're, hoping to maybe learn more about or kind of achieve just being here at the summit in general.
Yeah, honestly, the AI of it all, I think that's like not just eduWeb, but at conferences and gatherings in general right now, we're talking about AI. And it's interesting, even though you look at the agenda and see lots and lots of talks on AI, we're all kind of talking about it a little bit differently, different viewpoints, different angles, different considerations, which with a subject like AI that is very polarizing for good reason, I think it's really interesting to hear all these different takes on why it's good, why it's bad, and maybe how to control it, which is kind of what my talk is about. as a writer, and it's kind of strange to come here and talk about media strategy and AI, but I think there's a lot of panic around what AI is saying, certainly what AI can do when it comes to creative roles, but for institutions and brands in general, what are they saying about us? And if that's wrong, like, what do I do? And there really is something that you can do as the brand owners. And so my talk is called When AI Answers First, Who Controls Your Story? And we just kind of go through that and say, AI, it's going to happen. Students are searching more than ever, and that's only going to continue. But you're not helpless, and you're still creative. You are still the creator, and AI is getting all that information from somewhere. It's not just making it up. Whatever it's saying does exist somewhere on the internet, and that's where you can come in and you can really affect it and take some of that control back. So we're going to walk through an action plan, some examples where the most credibility is found in your content, and also in external sites. And hopefully that'll make people feel a little bit better and a little bit more empowered about how AI is affecting their stories.
Yeah, that's a big thing for me. Just sort of, I'm always sort of a sucker for like going around to all the tables at like an exhibit hall and kind of talk about, what folks are kind of working on for vendors and stuff. But but that was kind of just refreshing, I guess, that, a lot of people are coming at kind of that core topic, from a variety of perspectives or strategies, but like that idea of empowerment, kind of, giving folks agency to feel like they're not just, kind of being, I don't know, like it's happening to them. Like, It's like they can sort of, use some tools to get, kind of a snapshot of like your visibility in AI. So you can kind of know like, if we're showing up, how we're showing up. And then you can understand like, okay, we want to get here. How do we get there? Ways that we can leverage, I guess, that maybe are more immediate or longer term or whatever. Like, so yeah, because I think we're just at a point now that, again, I'm like, it's sort of refreshing and I'm grateful for is that like, things are getting more tangible, more actionable, more like measurable, all those kind of good aspects of the work, versus it feeling like overwhelming, daunting, scary, like ambiguous or whatever it might be. So
yeah, daunting I think is a good word, especially, I mean, we're seeing a ton of talks here today about like digging into how it finds what and what is crawling and what's not going to work. Like it's very technical. Again, I'm a creative. I'm here as a writer listening to all of this. And so I'm not in like the nuts and bolts of the website builds and things like that. I very much am coming at it from a what can I control, from the creative point of view, from the stories. And the great news is, like you said, it can feel daunting, but the first couple steps, especially in just like an enrollment office at an institution, they're pretty easy. It's just looking at your narrative, getting the content you want out there and things like that. So there's, of course, partnering with media agencies. We're going to talk about that when you want to get into the tracking and how do you track things now when people aren't clicking and stuff like that. So there are some parts where we think partnering is a great idea. But in general, there's a lot you can do on your own. And when you break it down piece by piece, and it makes it a little bit more manageable and feel like less of a scary tech monster.
Well, yeah, and I think once you sort of get your arms around, something like this, but anything like in terms of, okay, like we're here, we need to get there. Like, yeah, you can figure out the things that, maybe are more immediate and you can start feeling kind of like you're building some momentum, but then like, oh yeah, we could definitely do this, but yeah, we maybe need some support.
Yeah.
Some, different skill sets or added capacity or bandwidth, whatever it might be. And just always that idea of good partnership. And, I think there's just been continually sort of a paradigm shift around just sort of like, vendors and external organizations and institutions where it's like, yeah, I mean, like you're this venerable institution, been doing things a certain way for a long time. Things are changing very quickly. And I think kind of the idea, like we're all on the same team here. We're all trying to get to the same goals. We're all, trying to, make sure that these institutions survive and thrive and students are, making informed choices and are successful and all that kind of good stuff. So I have a theory, though, that I kind of want to ask you and capture for the content here.
Yeah.
All the kind of newfangled, like, AEO makes me think that, like, it's honestly reinforcing, like, the fundamentals of good, like, SEO, PR, whatever. And obviously, like, it just takes a different kind of shade now with, like, AI tools and platforms. But I'm just curious your take on that, I guess, of the idea of, like, how much is this moment, to a certain extent, just reinforcing the good fundamentals of like digital marketing from your perspective? And I guess if you want to kind of build on that of like, yes, and or whatever, whatever, way you want to take it. But that's kind of like my working theory right now. Is just kind of interesting that I guess like what is old is new again or something, even in this very, very new moment.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's forced us to focus back on the audience. I don't know that the focus ever shifted from audience, but again, there's just so much to think about especially when you're paying for marketing, your paid media or whatever, and audience segmentation can get not murky, but it's really shown that it just comes down to what the user, the student, whoever you're talking to really needs. What are they looking for and how clear can you be about that? Answering their questions directly, knowing what they're looking for. And then don't value pack your messaging. Also, there's like information overload these days with AI and with really everything else. The internet is big, as we know. So it's kind of goes back to, again, being clear and focus on what you're trying to say. Uncovering their needs and what they need to know through a strong strategy, basing it all back in your strategy, and again, who you're talking to and speaking directly to that.
I guess it's like a follow-up to that. Is there anything that you feel like is less important than it might have been 5 or so years ago? Like, 'cause I think it's an idea, like, it feels like now we're kind of having a full circle moment of like, I guess it feels like maybe to like, PR, like putting out press releases or whatever, like maybe felt kind of old fashioned a couple of years ago. But the idea of like talking to some people here, they're like, there's definitely like a pretty strong case to say that like, do more press releases. Like AI loves that. Like it's very, explicit, clear, succinct, and those sort of things. So like that feels like it's kind of rebounding. Is there anything that you feel like is less important?
Well, it's interesting you say that. When you talked about the press releases and how it's just like an info dump, right? Like, here's the brass tacks of what's happening. Here's who this person is. Here's everything you need to know. Maybe not super fun to read, but to a machine, this is exactly what we want. And what we've seen at Ologie in our digital and media team, we've been tracking these websites that are basically just that. It's like a separate part of like of a main site, and it's just like, here's a ton of information. And I would never want to read that. That sounds so boring, and it's not written in like the beautiful florid way that I would prefer. But again, to an AI crawler, that's a treasure trove. So I guess it's a little bit like the modern day PR release. So I think that's like maybe not less important. It's as important and kind of reshaped and reformed for this moment. As far as anything that's less important, it's a little bit with your last point. Like, I don't know if anything's less important because like those digital fundamentals are still going to be the bedrock of it all. People, strategy, what they're looking for, and getting them to the action. But maybe this is me, going against myself as a writer, but I feel like trying to make everything, like every ad, the whole website, fully in brand language, brand voice. I love writing that, don't get me wrong. But if we want to be found by AI, that might end up somewhere, but really it's not saying anything to a machine. So I would say worry slightly less. I feel like I'm kicking myself saying this, but slightly less about beautiful brand language and focus on what's really important to, of course, students. They still want to know about job placement rates and things like that. It's not that those things only matter to an AI crawler, but they want to know those brass tacks. And that's how you're also going to show up in these searches that you need to be on these days to get in front of students' eyes. So I'm not saying back off on artistry. I would never say that as a creative writer. But it can, I think, take a little bit of a backseat when we're focused on specifically showing up in AI searches.
I think there's a big part of it is like, what is your goal? Like, so that could be like, okay, let's sort of like, pull back the throttle on, like the kind of floral language that's, really grabby and,
And there's a place for that, certainly.
Right. Like figure out the right lanes, figure out what your goal is. Yeah. And I think there could certainly be moments where kind of being too beholden to that would have you feel very like restrained or prohibitive or, that you're like kind of just spinning your wheels because you're like, I don't know, that doesn't, the void, but like, so then you're just like doing nothing versus being like, okay, well, maybe let's like channel that energy this way. We need to do more, stuff that's super, kind of primed for, AEO or whatever. So I think, like figure out the goals, figure out the right lanes, figure out the right ways to kind of channel it. Because I think my thought was like, in terms of like what might be less important is the idea of like kind of overclocking on like social, because I think it's just the idea of like, it's just like an own platform you can like put out and, promote things, whatever else. But the idea that like that's absolutely got to be part of your strategy. But like anymore, it feels like it's just like, there's just obviously so much noise and whatever else. And it's like, anymore, very much pay to play for a lot of stuff. So just kind of like even that idea of like right sizing expectations, right sizing like investments. And I think, maybe just I guess I'll put this back to you because I'm clearly thinking out loud. The idea of like, you maybe just need to like reset and adjust your strategy. So it's not as if like nothing is not important or, like anything is not important. You might just need to kind of like move things around and like, pivot a little bit or something, and or just like the way that you go about things or understanding what is like a top priority or something, I guess that, So it's like, it feels like, the fundamentals are strong, as important as ever, but adjusting expectations, your goals, like updating things, and just worrisome if somebody was just continuing down the same path because they're like, oh, well, yeah, the fundamentals are still, I would just keep doing it or whatever. It's like, well, you might need to, make some adjustments in terms of like your voice here versus there, or like how much you're doing something or, versus another thing. So,
and just trying new things too. Like you mentioned social. And I think, we're always going to want to place some ads on Meta, things like that. But AI isn't looking at Meta at all. Where it is looking is Reddit. And so that's an area where maybe you can't control the conversation. There are new students are talking about an experience they had, or a parent is posting something. It could be good or bad, but there are people are talking about you, right? However, why don't you get in that conversation? Do an AMA with one of your enrollment officers, things like that. So I think that we haven't seen that a ton. I'm not saying no one is doing it, but I think that's a good opportunity of doing something different in this day and age, knowing that not only, of course, are you communicating with your audiences the way you want to, talking to prospects directly. They don't have to be on campus. They don't have to be in your office. They can be on a message board. And so there's that benefit, of course, in just like authentically connecting, but also knowing that AI is going to Reddit. And that's where they're getting those culture pools about what's it like on campus. What is the faculty like? What is the vibe? That kind of thing. That's just like something new that I don't know that it's been a top priority in the past. It's been, again, the very traditional paths of admissions accounts and things like that, which of course work. But now it's like, this is the time to, how can you more like hands-on get in there and make your mark, talk to your people, and then also know that this is going to be picked up when they then, I saw this enrollment officer from X, Y, and Z university. Let me look them up in ChatGPT. And if you've been doing that, or if you keep doing that, that stuff is going to come up and it's going to reiterate what they saw and build that trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I guess something like Reddit would fall within like a social media bucket, but that would be like, certainly, I'm sure for some teams, like, a fairly sizable shift. And then even then, like right sizing expectations of like, oh, well, we're going there, like, what's going to happen? What are the outcomes or whatever? Like, it's just, it's going to be different.
Experimental is the name of the game.
Yeah. I mean, and I think,
because
I think that's something else that's come up. And clearly I'm like processing a lot from like conversations yesterday, just, folks listening. But the idea is like, if you just keep kind of pounding the same strategies or trying to like extract one little, bit more juice out of like the strategies that you've been using for years, it is the idea of like, you can look out to some other, interesting areas. A lot of folks are doing some interesting work here to find some new fertile, kind of pastures to kind of like start to get just more value from, because I think it's that idea of like, if you just were doing a lot of paid ads and you're just like, I guess we just got to keep paying more and more and more and more and more. Like, it's like, okay, well, maybe kind of like, again, like pivot, adjust, right size of, expectations of like, how you're showing up in certain places, or, even just kind of being like, okay, our social, we're going to like, decrease here in terms of just like throwing ad dollars, ad nauseum, at a certain platform. Yeah. Go check out Reddit and see what we can, sort of get from that platform. But as we're kind of winding down, kind of two final questions always like to ask, just especially at events like this, like what is a trend line kind of that you're following, something that's kind of on the horizon, you think folks should kind of, keep an eye out for?
Yeah. Okay. Two things come to mind. The first one is not new. In fact, it's old, but it's like been a little bit reborn, and that's influencer marketing. I think as I'm sitting here with like a creator, a person that runs their whole, creators are everything. It's creator partnerships now. It's not influencer marketing. It's not a one-off, like hold our product up, like just in the general thinking of like a brand. They run the show. They just took over Cannes a few weeks ago and were there with the biggest brands. I mean, they are like corporations unto themselves, and they bring in so much money. And so it's just interesting to see how I think like the term influencer has been like scoffed at by whoever, but they're running advertising, they're driving advertising. And so I am just like, how do we in the higher ed industry get into that game? And it's happened a little bit. I think the first maybe hints of influencers having an impact on higher ed was like Bama Rush Talk. That was crazy huge. A few of those girls are just influencers now. Fingers crossed they finished college. I actually don't know.
It's like, make sure you get agreed.
I have not followed up with them, but I know that they still have huge followings. They're posting, get huge brand deals, all from just posting their outfits that they wore during Rush. And of course, that gives a ton of visibility and publicity to the schools as well. Alex Earle, who is a huge influencer. I know she went to U Miami's business school, and they have a scholarship named after her now. Like, she went back and did some work with them. great visibility for U Miami. Alex Earl has a ton of fans, and I can just imagine a teenager being like, I think Alex Earl is great. I want to be like her. She went to U Miami, their business school, and now she's a businesswoman. She was great on Dancing with the Stars. Like, I can, that stuff connects. And that kind of leads to my next point, which is we have talked a lot about, can AI do this? Can AI make this for me? And we know that it can. It can write, it can design, it can give you a marketing strategy, it can do all that. And now I think there's a little bit, maybe not a pivot, but a slight pendulum shift where it's like, okay, can we trust this? Because I just saw talk about, the top 10 sites that AI is pulling from. And it's like the first two, like the first was Reddit, number one. But the other 8, even the speaker said, like, I haven't heard of any of these websites. And ChatGPT doesn't have it built into their algorithm yet to parse this website is trustworthy or this is a website from wherever else, and we don't really know. It just throws it in there. That's a big part of my talk as well, and trying to curate that story. So a trend that I think is going to come around is that pendulum shift back to, can we trust this? Who are the professionals that can kind of gauge whether what we're getting from AI is trustworthy, whether this creative that we've put in works, and things like that. So it's AI is not going away. We all know that. There's gonna be a shift in how we work with it, and knowing that humans are going to be at the center of that, whether it's those creators that now are running the show or branding agencies, media agencies that can look at something and say, wouldn't do that, we would do this, but let's work with it this way. I think people are going to continue to be really paramount to it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that comes to mind with that sort of conversation, I mean, I absolutely agree, because I think that's just the idea that like higher ed is not insulated from like, the rest of the world and those sort of trends and stuff. And that as a podcaster, it's really cool to see that Purdue University has this amazing flagship podcast called This is Purdue. And the idea that like, I mean, they're working with a creator, but like she's an alum, and I think there's like that kind of aspect of like kind of what you're talking about, like Alex Earl, you went to a place and you can kind of speak to your experience and be kind of this ambassador in one way. And I think maybe just sort of like rehashing the idea of, you have a notable person who's an alum, you're probably going to try to leverage them for some sort of like, partnership or whatever else, or kind of lift them up in advertising. So it's kind of that same idea of like, if you have somebody who kind of draws a lot of attention, who could be a really great spokesperson or ambassador or, whatever else, like not just like putting their face on a static ad and, whatever else it is, that idea of like, me thinking of kind of that This is Purdue podcast. I'm like, kind of just like sprinkling in where it's like, I was a student. What, like she's talking to like, notable alumni from Purdue or whatever, like that dynamic of the conversation and it being more, engaging or whatever else. Like, I think, there's just a lot of value there in terms of like, if you're going to be going down a route where you feel like, content marketing is going to be really, kind of feasible or meaningful or what, just in terms of maybe where it's like, we're just like such a unique institution. It's hard to like capture it in just sort of a, like a banner ad or whatever. It's like, like just that idea of like, okay, let's try to think about like, just have, a little creativity, imagination of like, what could, influencer, creator kind of marketing look like for us? Because that could just be such a huge value add where like just other things just feel like, it's like, oh, we're going to, if you're speaking to, obviously like you work with a lot of folks for like kind of brand stuff, it is the idea of like, you kind of learn about an institution and it would just be like, whatever they're doing and they're just feeling like it's not working, whatever. It's like, you don't need to change who you are. Like, you're great. What you're doing is amazing. You just like have to showcase that in a different way. And I think that idea of like, it being more personal, more authentic, more real, more kind of just dynamic, whatever, that they could be just a really, just like a really productive route, I think, for people to kind of look into. So
students want to see themselves there. Well, the question is like, will I like going here? Of course. Is this worth the money, the huge financial investment that will affect me for the rest of my life? Will it be worth it? Will I enjoy it? And the easier you can make it for them to picture themselves there and be like, oh, this is so me. Or alternately, which is just as good, this is not me. We don't want a bad fit either. But if you're authentic in that way and you're giving those real stories that, talking it through on a podcast or through, having influencers on campus, however you do it, the realer you can be, the more students are going to, that is going to resonate with them. And that is going to bypass AI. It's going to exist alongside AI no matter what. Again, connection is what it's always going to come down to.
All right. We will wrap up here with our final question. We love to ask all of our guests advice that you would give to higher ed leaders navigating this moment.
Yes. It's the advice that I gave myself, I think, when I with the onset of AI, again, as a creative, as a writer, I think the first thing ChatGPT made it really clear it can do is write. It can write ads, it can write books, it can do all that. And so a lot of us passionate writers felt like, well, I'm cooked, so that's it for me. But that's really not the case. I think we, relaxing a little bit about the capabilities and stop thinking about what's it going to take over, or how is it going to complicate our lives, whether, again, with like our story being out there, how is it going to lead people astray or make things harder? And I see it as that tool. I use it as a tool. I think, again, there's going to be that pendulum shift back toward audiences craving authenticity. AI slop is like the biggest topic right now, and how you can so tell when something is designed by AI. A little bit to my dismay with the whole like M-dash thing, because a lot of writers will say, I used it before AI and that, but there are these markers, of course. It looks like it was designed by AI. It sounds like AI. And people are getting hip to that, especially these younger generations. They can spot it a mile away. So there will always be a craving for authenticity, a craving for realness. And so you don't, I think, want to put your communications or, your ads or anything out there led with AI, because they'll clock it and it will turn them off immediately. But use it as that tool, as I won't say a fact checker, because we should be fact checking AI, but a pressure tester. For me personally, if I wrote a line and it sounds weird and I don't know why, I will drop it into an AI and be like, this feels clunky, tell me why. And it's because there's some deep grammatical thing that I don't know about as a person with a human brain and not an encyclopedia. And it'll tell me what it is. And I can either write it the way it told me to, or I can just know, I need to just rearrange it this way. So again, it's not this AI takeover. It's not we write to the machine or we strategize to the machine anymore. It's we use it to help us make everything go a little bit faster. Yes, take a little bit of pressure off our brains too. All the thinking everyone does all day long. It's nice to export some of that into a machine, but just stay grounded in that person-to-person connection, and that can be, felt through a screen. I would also say trust your creative partners, whether that's internally or if you're working with an agency or something like that. It's very easy to put what you need into a machine and say, okay, it's done. But there's more work to do at that point. It's like, is this accurate? Does this sound overtly AI? Things like that. And if you don't check that with someone or have someone iterate on it, you're going to get called out for it. Again, we talked about Reddit a lot. That's where they're going to do it. They're going to say, this school is cool, but like all their stuff is AI and we can so tell. So trust those partners, still work with your creative partners. Human touch, I think, is that like magic element, that special sauce for everything. And I want AI to help us make that magic a little bit more potent and not take over it.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. The idea of, I always joke about like we're just all becoming more like cyborgs or whatever. The idea of like we can be like augmenting our humanity, but we're still human. Like just being a geek nerd, whatever. Because the idea of like there's a difference between like an android versus a cyborg versus like whatever.
I wouldn't call you on that. I wouldn't know, but I believe you.
Yeah. So the idea of like not completely offloading or even on the other side, like not just sort of like, sticking your head in the sand either, like just kind of being like, oh, there's, no value. We're not going to use it. We're just going to completely avoid it. It's like using it to augment, check your work, supplement, like, because it's like, like if I need help, a title for a podcast episode or for questions or like summarize this for me just so I can like, kind of integrate it into conversation, whatever it might be. Like it's use it responsibly, like, and it's even the idea of like, don't feel so like it's infallible or whatever. It's like check it, review it, proofread it, like any of those sort of things. But I think it's all just that balance and kind of harmony with, these great new tools and everything, but then just kind of understanding how it can work for you, just in terms of like your visibility and, reach and exposure and stuff like that. So
I think trying to outsmart or work around or avoid AI at like this late in the game that's a losing battle. Again, it's a ton of the conversation here for a reason. Like it's not going anywhere. It's going to be involved in our lives and our careers and our industries. So you're not getting away from it, but it's trying to figure out how it can work as that partner for you. And honestly make your life easier. It can make your life easier. Fighting it, I don't think is smart. So I stopped.
Yeah, I guess, everybody's like joking, like embrace your robot overlords, just like bring them in and just,
It's a thought partner. It's just a thought partner. That's me every day. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
And I will say, look, I will be totally transparent and vulnerable. I have put a line in there and it's given me something that I'm like, oh, that's better. Oh, that's sharper in this way. And it's like, I might still tweak it. Maybe I'll use it as is, but it also teaches me something where it's like, if I like just cut this down, because I'm an overwriter and overtalker, I can kind of keep going. If I just cut this down by this percent, or if this angle it had is really interesting, that happens too, where I'll type a line in and it's like, it'll pop in another word. And I'm like, wait, that word is actually cool and it can mean these 4 other things, which is in their strategy. And then I'm down a whole other line on my own. It maybe gave me that idea or it prompted me, but then I can continue to create in this way. And I don't know that I would have gotten down that path without a helper, without a thought partner. And it just happens to be an automated one, So yeah, I think it's all on how you use it, how your relationship with it. It sounds weird to have a relationship with the tool, but again, being so deep in the creative work, we're very like touchy-feely about our stuff like that. So I've really been able to move. I went from like the sky is falling, AI is terrible hater to like, okay, this can make me better. This can make me do my work faster and give my brain a break. It can do the tedious stuff for me, so I can focus on that like meaty, real creative concepting, strategic stuff that I wouldn't want it to give me. And I think that's the glass half full way of looking at it, because again, like I said earlier, it's not going anywhere. So like live with it or really have a tough time.
Well, I mean, just obviously these spaces, so many different organizations, agencies, whatever, are like inviting people in. The idea of kind of like wherever you're at, like come on in, we'll sort of like work with you to kind of figure out like how these tools can help you get where you want to go, as an institution.
And
so
you don't have to love AI. Like, it doesn't have to be like, I'm so glad this is here. A lot of people do feel that way because it makes their jobs easier. You don't have to be a huge advocate of it, or want to use it every day all the time, but just being aware of it, especially getting back to like the AI search, and all of that, just knowing it's gonna be talking for you, and you need to be as involved as you can. So you make sure that you and AI are singing from the same songbook, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think that metaphor too, somebody had a good kind of play on that, of the idea of like, just like everything being like an orchestra, like just all the tools that we have now, like sometimes like, I need a little bit more of this, like, whatever the idea, like it's all part of the, the orchestra of, however much you're maybe delegating or leveraging AI, how much you're using paid social versus streaming ads versus, people do like, basically like billboards in high schools or something to like, but like it's just all this kind of stuff. We might just be like, again, just depending on your needs, your goals, like what have you already been using, what haven't you really looked into and all that. It's just the idea of looking at it all as sort of a beautiful mosaic and orchestra. Just kind of like that metaphor. But
I love it.
So great talking to you. I appreciate everything that you've shared, ways to connect with you and Ologie in the episode description. But yeah, just thanks so much for taking some time.
Awesome. This is great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.